everyone. Welcome to the Troy Library. We know we couldn't be in person, but the next best thing was Zoom. And today we're having birding near home with the bird guys. That's Rick Forrest and Vic Dorr. They've been here before and they've done a great job. And we thought, well, what else could we do for a program that people could do at home and enjoy nature? And I thought, why can't we do things about birds in our backyards and near our homes? So that's what they're going to talk about today. We want to thank the Friends of the Library for helping us and supporting our programs so that we can have programs like these from the Troy Library. What's going to happen is guys will begin. You're going to hear his voices, and they've got some fantastic pictures. And if you have any questions, put them in the question and answer down at the bottom. And at the end of the program, we'll bring them back up and they can answer a few questions for you. I hope you enjoy. So here's Rick and Vic.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Rick Forrest. I'm a retired Rochester science teacher. I'm presenting this evening with my lifelong friend, Vic Dorr, whom I've known since 7th grade. Vic is a mechanical engineer. He is currently head of the Building and Grounds Department at Older Persons Commission in Rochester, otherwise known as the OPC. We got interested in birds about 45 years ago. I was actually studying birds as a graduate student on Beaver Island, and Vic and another friend came up to see me. And I think that trip and maybe a few other outings, we got hooked. We became passionate about birds, and we've been birding ever since.
Yep, that's absolutely true. Also, good evening to our audience tonight, and thank you for tuning in, like Rick said. Yeah, we kind of got into birding long before it was cool. So it's been a great hobby. We continue to do it, and it's a great social outlet because we have another friend of ours that comes along with us on most of our little outings, and you get to meet some of the nicest people when you're doing it. But in these COVID times right now, a lot of our usual birding festivals or annual get-togethers for things like Hawk Fest and Crane Fest have been put on hold. So that's why we're going to talk about birding in your backyard and near home, because there's still plenty to see out there and we don't want anybody to miss it. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Rick and we're going to get this thing underway.
All right, so you know, that's the nice thing about birding is you can do it in your backyard. Most of the slides we're going to show tonight were either in our backyards or friends' backyards. And so, but the easiest way to enjoy birding is in your backyard is to bring the birds to you. This is a hopper style feeder. We're going to talk a little bit about bird feeding, and that's how you bring in the birds. Hopper style feeders have a top that lifts off or flips open so you can fill them with seed, and they usually can accommodate larger birds like this northern cardinal. And by the way, once you've attracted the birds, if you can't see them, you can enjoy their sound. This is another hopper style feeder. This is a winter shot. This particular feeder has a lever that's, if something heavy were to get on it, on the perch, it acts like a lever and closes the whole opening. The idea there is to try to keep squirrels off, so or not let squirrels access the feeder. But some squirrels may figure it out anyway. When you see the word squirrel-proof feeder, I think you have to take it with a grain of salt. This red squirrel kind of figured out how to keep it open with his arm in there. He may have had a little help with the aid of an ice storm, which may have helped freeze it open.
Okay, here's a picture of both style hopper feeders. The one has the visual window on the right there where you can see your seed. The one on the left, not so much, but they both work on the same principle, either a spring or a counterweight. And the interesting part in this particular photo here is that we have two different reddish colored birds that kind of look like a sparrow with a little bit of red on them. On the right-hand side is the house finch, which has been a recent expansion into Michigan over the last 30, 40 years. And on the left is a purple finch, both a male and a female. Now, the difference between these two, predominantly to tell the difference, is on the purple finch on the left, you will notice that the wing bars have a reddish color and that the red color on the purple finch continues all the way down into his belly, almost towards the legs. You don't usually see that so much on a house finch.
This is another style feeder meant to discourage or keep out squirrels. They actually put a tube feeder inside of a cage, so birds like this chickadee have no problem accessing the seed. Some tube feeders have smaller holes and they're designed for a different type of feed. This goldfinch is on a tube feeder that has smaller holes and it's designed for Niger seed. Sometimes called thistle seed because it's similar in size to thistle seed that may come from plants that we have here. Goldfinches, in fact, love thistle seed or Niger seed. Hear them all spring and summer. And while they look like that in spring and summer, their nuptial plumage, both males and females look like this in the wintertime. So here's goldfinches in winter plumage. And again, this is another Niger seed feeder. Notice there's little metal protectors around the holes to keep them from getting chewed larger. But yeah, this is goldfinches in winter plumage.
Here's another style of tube feeder. This one, if you notice, the holes are a little bit larger, and these also have guards around them, and that is to keep the squirrels or chipmunks or other animals, sometimes even raccoons will climb up there. It'll keep them from chewing the plastic open, and it really does a good job on their teeth. And this beautiful shot is from a rose-breasted grosbeak. This is a male, and most likely to see these in the early spring coming through in your feeders, probably in May, April and May. Beautiful bird.
If you really want to get the birds close in, you can try one of these window style feeders that have suction cups so that they come right up to your window. This chickadee didn't seem to mind that. Now, the only disadvantage is that if you get something heavy like a squirrel that comes after maybe jumping up there, it might pull the suction cups off. So while this particular picture shows some larger seed in it, I have found that if I just use Niger seed, which the squirrels aren't as fond of, they tend to leave it alone and still get a pretty good variety of birds. Let's talk a little bit about some different types of feed that you can buy, different types of seed. Upper left there is striped sunflower, probably the most common thing that a lot of different birds like, and a variant of that is in the upper right. Those are black oiler sunflower seeds. In the lower left, you have safflower seeds. Cardinals really like that. In the lower right, you have two different small round seeds, milo and millet. Milo and millet are really liked by like house sparrows and there's a few birds that like it, but they tend to be used as filler seed when you buy mixed feed at the store. So your higher quality mixed feed, like you see in the top center, is going to have a mixture of black oiler sunflowers, maybe some cracked corn, maybe some safflower, but it won't have as much of the milo and millet. In the bottom center is a picture of what Niger seed looks like, very small. This is a seed, I bought it as it was labeled a no-mess blend. The sunflowers have had their shells removed. And so they're sunflower kernels. And those are mixed in with some safflower and some peanuts, some cracked corn. You can see it's a very high quality blend. I got this at Defoe's in Oxford. It was a 40-pound bag for about $35. Another no-mess seed is pure sunflower kernels. So it's a bag of sunflower, no no husks. And of course, the real advantage of the no mess blends is, number one, you're not going to have them growing beneath your feeder in the springtime. So you're not going to have to pull out all these plants. And number two, there's no husks to clean up. I think 20 pounds at Menards was about $27. That sounds expensive, but 20 pounds of sunflower kernels is equivalent to about 70 pounds of Oilers as far as nutritional value. They'll go through your feeder slower.
All right, here's a nice little shot. It's got a variety of feeds or foods available for different birds. Again, this looks like a hopper feeder with a nice suet holder on the side and a fresh cut orange on the right-hand side. And as you can see, the oriole, which prefers the sweeter foods in the spring, like oranges and grape jelly, is posed on the right. And in the center is a red-bellied woodpecker. Even though a lot of people see the red head on these are a red-bellied. A real redhead woodpecker would not have the black and white stripes on the back. It would appear to be more black with an open white patch at the end of the wings. And on the left is everybody's favorite, the blue jay, and he's probably eating some sunflower seed that's coming out of that hopper.
Another type of feed that I recently tried is a mealworm cake. Now it's got dried mealworms pressed into a cake, and there also is some seed mixed in. So this chickadee, for example, really went for it. I have had at this mealworm cake, nuthatches, chickadees, woodpeckers. I haven't gotten bluebirds to it, as the picture on the package shows. Here's what a chickadee sounds like, named after its call. Chickadee-dee-dee. Of course, they have another call that I like to call the cheeseburger call, because it sounds like that's what they're saying.
Linda thinks that sounds like a squeaky swing.
Here's a relative of the chickadee. This is the tufted titmouse, although right now his tuft is kind of flat, but he's at a suet cake. Commercially available suet cakes usually have seed mixed in. And so some people, of course, they'll also attract squirrels, and they're really after the seed that's mixed in with the suet cake. Now, one thing that you can try is raw suet. Usually you can get these from the butcher or meat department at some place like Meijer. Sometimes they'll wrap up a little bit of raw suet, and you can put this in some type of holder, like a small suet cage like you see here. This is a red-breasted nuthatch. This was at a friend of mine's backyard up north. Here's what they sound like. Very nasal sounding call. Also at my friend's house up north, and this was a few years back, but this is a pileated woodpecker. Some people pronounce it pileated. Both are acceptable. This is a 17-inch long woodpecker, as large as a large crow. So when they come to the feeder, it's a pretty impressive sight. And he was also feeding on the raw beef suet.
You won't mistake their drilling holes either.
Yeah, actually, I think it's a female. But here are two common woodpeckers that we have in our area, and I just happened to get a picture of both of them on the suet feeder. The one on the left is a hairy woodpecker, and the one on the right is a downy woodpecker. They have the same markings, except males have a red patch. On both species, the males would have that red patch. So we have a female downy on the right and a male hairy on the left. They're both after that raw suet. Here's what the hairy sounds like. And here's the downy. Now, if you see just one of them, sometimes it's hard to tell which one it is because you don't have a size reference, but you'll notice the Harry's bill is about as long as his head, whereas the Downey's bill is, less than half of its head size. This is a pure suet cake. It's a commercially available suet cake with no seed. And now this is a little bit hard to find. I think I found this I found it at Defoe's in Oxford. But the advantage of this is that squirrels won't go after it because there's no seed mixed in. This hairy woodpecker seems to like it.
Here's an interesting feeder, one that I keep in the backyard. It's nothing but a big coiled spring, and you insert the peanuts into the coil, and the blue jays and the nuthatches and the cardinals have a grand time trying to pull these things out and play around with some of them.
These kind of feeders can be very entertaining. In the springtime, a good thing to put out is grape jelly. Now, this particular feeder is designed for Baltimore Orioles. You can see a picture of it on the left. It's got a tray on top to put some jelly into. And then it also holds a sugar water type of nectar that you can mix up. But you can see birds that typically might go to seed feeders, some of them like the grape jelly as well, like this chickadee. But here's an oriole, and this is what the feeder was designed to attract. And that's a male Baltimore oriole, and he's enjoying some grape jelly off the top of that feeder. Here's what the feeder wasn't designed for. The squirrels like the grape jelly as well. This was our opening shot. This is a house finch, and they have a sweet tooth as well. They'll eat the grape jelly, and they'll also eat the orange halves. I've got a blood red orange half stuck on a nail here on top of the post. Here's what the house finch sounds like. Red-bellied woodpeckers love oranges. I have one that visits every day. I put a new orange half out every day, and he's there every morning. In fact, if I don't get it out there in time, he's like looking at me like, okay, where is it? You can also see a male Baltimore oriole on the oriole feeder right below him. Never get sick of looking at Baltimore orioles. If you put orange halves out, there's a very good chance that you're going to get these visitors. They arrive here early in May, and you'll get them every day. Here's what they sound like.
Many of those orioles are moving through right now.
Yep, I'm still getting them. I had some today on the oranges.
Awesome.
Here's a red-bellied woodpecker. I already showed you that they like oranges. And the adult red-bellied woodpecker is the lower bird here. And a baby red-bellied woodpecker who doesn't have the red hood yet is on the above. And he is feeding his baby a piece of orange. The baby probably hadn't fledged much earlier than a few days before this. One of the fun things about feeding birds is once in a while you get something a little more unusual. And this is an orchard oriole. This happens to be a first-year male orchard oriole. The adult males actually are a brick red color. Had one for one morning this year, didn't get a shot of them. But yeah, so this is an orchard oriole, and they have a sound a little bit like the house finch sound. Now you can make the sugar water, as the slide shows, with 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. That's the ratio you want to have. Mix that up. And what I do is I put 2 cups of sugar to 8 cups of water, and I make enough to put in a pitcher. But before I put it in the pitcher, I boil it, and that retards the spoilage. So you boil it and you let it cool, and then you put it in the pitcher, and then you've got 3 or 4 refills for your feeder without having to mix it every time. You just keep it in the refrigerator.
I find that it keeps for weeks in the refrigerator that way.
It does keep a long time. And this is the main reason you'd want to mix up sugar water is to attract hummingbirds. If you're not feeding hummingbirds, you should, because they're very entertaining. You'll get them all summer. This is actually a video clip.
Beautiful.
Here's a female. We only have 1 species of hummingbird here east of the Mississippi. Occasionally there are sightings of some other ones, but it's called the ruby-throated hummingbird, but the female doesn't have the ruby throat. And even the first-year males don't get that ruby throat right away. But here is a shot showing the ruby throat. That's the male ruby-throated hummingbird showing all the rubies on the right. Now, look at the bird on the left. That is also a male. Where's the ruby throat, you might wonder? They have to have just the right light hitting that. Otherwise, it doesn't look red. It'll look black. And that's because there is no red pigment in there. That is not red because there's pigment. It's red because of the way the light interacts with the feathers. I'm going to put a picture in the lower right here of an oil, a little oil slick on the road. And everybody has seen colors in the oil. Well, there's no red pigment in the oil either. The oil has an upper and lower boundary of the oil layer, and the way the light reflects from that either enhances some colors or cancels some other colors out. And that's kind of what's going on with the bird's feathers. So you don't want to overlook water at your bird feeding station. This is a plug-in bird bath that I keep going all winter, and I just unplug it in the summer, and it's a clamp-on bird bath that I can kind of clamp onto my deck. These happen to be pine siskins. They're not here every winter. They're actually a bird from further north, and once in a while, they'll wander this far south during winter. They're related to goldfinches, but they are a different species. You can see a little tinge of yellow on their tail, on their wing feathers there.
I haven't had one in the yard in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years for me too. Now, a lot of birds are going to be in your yard, and you may not get them to your feeder. And you should be able to enjoy those too in your backyard, but it's going to require you to go out and look for the birds. And so, and the best time of year to do this is when the birds are migrating through, because you get a good variety. Now, migration is when the birds come from further south to our area. And there's a whole group of birds that we like to really enjoy in the month of May called warblers. These are very small birds. They're about 4.5 inches in length. This particular bird is a palm warbler. He was in my backyard very early May. And you can tell them with the rusty cap there. And here's what they sound like. What you need to do to find these warblers is just get out and look high in the trees and just look for movement. The trees won't be fully leaved out yet if you're out there in early May, and they'll be a little easier to find. This one's called a yellow-rumped warbler. He was in a tree right next to my deck. He's got a yellow patch on the top of his head, a yellow patch on either side of his breast, and a yellow rump, which the picture doesn't show. But here's what they sound like. Again, these birds are at your house. They're in your shrubs and trees. You have to get out and look for them.
They come in early in the spring and they stay late through the summer, actually into autumn.
Yeah, some of them might go further north, but this one here is the yellow rump warbler will stay around. Here's another common warbler that stays around, and this is a yellow warbler. It's smaller than a goldfinch, and it doesn't have the black wings. So you're not going to confuse it with a goldfinch. It's the only really small bird that looks all yellow when you're looking at it from a distance. Here's what they sound like. This was behind my house again, middle of May this year.
Patience pays off when you're looking for birds like this.
And I had a yellow warbler attempt a nest in some shrubs next to my house. And so, there's the mom yellow warbler on the nest. But I say attempt because unfortunately we had a windstorm and it tipped the contents of this nest. She didn't have babies in there yet. The eggs weren't hatched, but I think there may have been an egg or two in the nest. These are the shrubs that the nest was in. So you look in the trees and shrubs around your house and just look for movement. They're in there. This is a black Burnian warbler, again in the tree next to my deck, middle of May, just a couple of days after the earlier shot of the myrtle warbler was. Anyway, this very colorful bird. I know one time I took my brother birding and he said, "Hey, what are those birds that their head looks like a custom flame design on a 60s classic car?" And so this is a black Burnian warbler. Here's what they sound like.
I get those every spring in the oak tree back in the backyard.
This is the same tree, and I think it was about the day after the black Burnian warbler, and this is a chestnut-sided warbler. All of these warblers are colorful, and they're beautiful, and you can find them. We're encouraging you to look. This is going to be for next May when they're coming through, but encouraging you to get out and look around your house for these birds. Here's what the chestnut-sided warbler sounds like. This was at my friend's house up north a few years ago. Same house where I shot the pileated woodpecker. This is a pine warbler, and they're one of the very early arrivals. I want to say this was early April when I took this shot. It's a migratory bird, and it's a small warbler, but they tend to get up here pretty early. Here's what they sound like. I was out in my backyard, I don't know. I think this was, it was probably May still. But this was a pair of red-bellied woodpeckers, and they were courting. They were chasing each other around the tree trunk. I probably should have had some type of video to show this. There's a difference between male and females that you can't see in this picture, but the one on the left is the male because the red hood continues from the back of his head all the way to his bill. If we could see the front of the bird on the right, you'd see there's a little interruption. The red doesn't quite reach the bill on the females. We have a cherry tree in our yard, and it's a very tall tree, and way up high, there's a hole in the tree. And this year we had white-breasted nuthatches nesting in the hole. It took some work to get this shot because it was so high up. I had to get far from the tree so that it didn't look like I was looking straight up at it. I'll show you later on the setup that I used to get the picture. This is what the white-breasted nuthatches sound like. You'll get them at your feeder all winter. Now here's one of the first signs of spring. In fact, you might even hear them before you see them. but of course the red-winged blackbird, and here's what they sound like. You're going to hear that right around the beginning of March. The males are black with those red epaulets. The females are brown and streaked. Here's a gray catbird. Now, catbirds are named because they have a cat meow-like call, but they also have a really beautiful, bubbly song to them. Now, I'm going to play you the sound here, and right at the very beginning is the meow-like cat call, and then it follows with the bird song. By the way, we get the catbirds eating that grape jelly. They come to that grape jelly a lot. Now, this wasn't in my backyard. I wish it was, but I've had, I know, Vic, you've had them in your yard, and my friend Herb has had them at his feeder. This is an indigo bunting. Just one of the more beautiful birds you're going to see. And this is another one of those birds where the color is not due to pigment. There's no blue pigment in this bird. It is the way the light interacts with the feathers that's giving it that blue color. Now, this is, I think, a first-year male. He's not fully blue yet. The adults are pretty much a solid blue color. The females are brown, and they look like a sparrow. Now, how are you going to tell that it's an indigo bunting then? If you look close at the bill, the lower bill is white. Okay, so the females are going to have that same thing, even though they're brown birds. They're going to have that white lower bill. Here's what they sound like. It's been described as 112233. Song sparrow. It's one of our native sparrows. A lot of you might be familiar with house sparrows, or sometimes called English sparrows. Those are not native to North America, but we do have a group of sparrows that are native, and this is one of the native sparrows. You can tell a song sparrow because they all have that central black spot on their breast. Some of them have a little bit more streaked breasts than this one, but they all have that black spot. And here's the sound.
Beautiful.
Standing on my deck one day with my camera, and I was trying to get pictures of orioles and some other things, and this mourning dove landed right next to the oranges. He wasn't there to eat the oranges, he just happened to land there, so I snapped a picture of him. And you all hear these birds all the time early in the morning. They're ground feeders for the most part, but they do like the bird bath. If you put a bird bath out, you're going to see the mourning doves there a lot. Eastern kingbird. This is a group. This is in a group of birds called flycatchers. They're called flycatchers because they'll leave their perch to go get a fly, or a flying insect of some sort, and they'll come right back to their perch. So it's a behavior. You'll see them, they'll fly up, they'll fly right back. This is one of the easier to recognize flycatchers. He's got, the dark top of his head there, and he's got a white band along the edge of his tail. You can kind of see that in the back on this picture. Here's what they sound like. We live near a lake, and one of the neighbors erected some wood duck boxes. And I walked out there one morning and saw the female wood duck sitting on top of the box. So I got a picture. They do nest in boxes or tree cavities if they can find them. The male is very colorful. I didn't get a slide of the picture of the male this year, so I didn't put it in the show, but they're very beautiful birds. And this wasn't in our backyard, although anybody that lives near water may have seen these near their yards. This is a great blue heron. This was, we actually shot this in Sterling State Park, but they are very fun to watch fish. They'll spear the fish and they'll eat a fish that's much larger than you would think they could possibly eat. And so they're pretty entertaining to watch.
I have several friends of mine who have backyard ponds, and these are nemesis birds for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a pond, and especially if you're, raising koi or goldfish in your pond, then you're probably not going to like these birds around.
You're giving them an expensive dinner. Well, there's our Canada geese. And no, they don't really fly in from Canada. They're found throughout North America. Some people will make the mistake of calling them Canadian geese, but we don't check their passport at the border. Canada is part of their Latin name for this bird, and that's the reason we call them a Canada goose or Canada geese.
These are sandhill cranes, both backyard shots. We used to live on a pond that had kind of this rocky shore, and those are a pair of sandhill cranes on the right. Now that was pretty early in the year. You can still see some snow. I think that was like in March. And then this summer, I looked over in my neighbor's backyard, and there was a pair of sandhill cranes. I think they were waiting for the party to begin because you can see his tables and chairs right there in the foreground.
Yeah, and the difference is in the early spring, the birds appear to be much grayer because they don't have the rust stains on their feathers from, wading in and being low in the water, especially during nesting season. They pick up that color from the iron in the water.
This is a female common merganser. Photographed her right near that wood duck box that I showed a couple of slides back. Now, a merganser is not really a duck. They look like one, but basically they are a fish-eating bird. The bill has, if you were to open its bill, you would see that there's like saw-type serrations along the edge of the bill. That's so that a fish won't slip out. The male merganser would have more of a greenish colored head, almost like a mallard, but but this bird is not a duck. Where we used to live, we used to get some diving ducks. Now, there's two groups of ducks. Some ducks, like mallards, and even the wood ducks that I showed a little bit earlier, they'll just tip their bodies so that their back ends is in the air, and then they'll be able to get, maybe some plant material off of the shallow bottom. And those are called dabbling ducks. There are some other ducks that will dive deep, and these are both two examples of diving ducks, ringneck duck on the left and redheads on the right, male in the background, female in the foreground.
Very interesting to watch because some of these ducks will submerge and swim underwater and go 10, 15 yards underwater.
You'll see them go down, and then you're maybe trying to get a picture, and you don't know where they're going to come up.
Exactly.
If you feed the birds, you're probably also feeding these guys. This is a Cooper's hawk. This is an immature. The adult Cooper's hawk would have more of a reddish breast, but their primary prey is small birds. So if you're feeding the birds, you might be feeding two trophic levels, and that's Cooper's hawk. Activity around your bird feeder is probably somewhat common.
They like the mourning doves in my yard. Here's a little video that I shot over at Bloomer Park here in Rochester. And it's a male turkey on display. calling in a few females, probably trying to impress his harem of young ladies there. And pretty common spring sight around here now, especially if you get to places like, the Lloyd Stage Nature Center or Stony Creek Metro Park.
Oh, he's got a few females there.
Yeah. It was shot with an iPhone.
Now, you mentioned Lloyd Stage Nature Center. Vic and I took a walk there last week, and we saw a turkey, as you can see here. These pictures were from there. And we put this in because we know a lot of you that live in Troy are probably not far. So the theme tonight is birding near home. And if you've got a nice park near home, by all means, explore that park.
It's nice that on their sign right out at the road there, they've got the usual picture of binoculars there. And anytime you see that along the roads or at a park, you know that you're going to have a good area to go and observe nature. This is an excellent facility, by the way. You have a wonderful interpretive center with several mounted birds, and the people that work there are very knowledgeable. They do evening bird walks where you can go and listen to owls and many other types of birds.
One of the things we saw on the walk was, and you could easily miss this because she was so well camouflaged, but look at this robin. The wings are spread, the tail is fanned. This is a sunbathing behavior exhibited by some birds. And there's different schools of thought as to why they do this. One school of thought is that by exposing perhaps parasites that might be in their feathers to the sun and the UV light that's in the sun, that might help with that. Some other folks think that it might help the preen oil that they preen their feathers with. They have an oil gland, most birds do, and they preen their feathers, that the sunlight helps that oil run over their feathers a little bit better. But at any rate, look how well camouflaged. We almost missed it. Nest boxes. You don't want to overlook nest boxes. My friend Dennis had this box right near his patio, and this is a house wren feeding a daddy longlegs to one of its babies. House wrens are pretty easy to attract if you put up a wren house. Here's another trip, and this time a caterpillar, but this time it looks like there's a little sibling rivalry going on.
I know when we had them in our yard, there was probably 5 of them that would stick their head out. And you don't get discouraged, because house wrens will try and attempt to build nests in several locations, and it's usually the female that will determine which one they're going to use to raise their family.
Right, he does a lot of work there building some dummy nests.
Sure does.
So my other friend, Herb, they have a son that is a welder, and he welded this very cool sculpture for their deck. And at the top of it is this little metal box that house wrens use. Now, this guy was having to peer way down. The nest got so high up inside the box that, had to go in and up. And here's a bluebird box, and this is a female bluebird. The females don't have as much blue as the male. Eastern bluebird. And here is another shot, different box, of a male bluebird. They're a little bit more brilliant blue, and they have that red breast. And by the way, they're in the same family as robins. They are in the thrush family. Another inhabitant of nest boxes are tree swallows. My next picture will show both males and females. This one has a female sticking her head out the box, and two males squabbling right above. Maybe over her, I don't know. But see, the males have that kind of that iridescent greenish blue color, and the females usually kind of this brownish or maybe just a kind of a duller version. I want to spend just a few minutes and talk about some things you could plant around your house to attract birds. This is a serviceberry. They have these nice white blossoms in the wintertime. I'm sorry, in the springtime. And but then toward early summer, they turn into berries. And these berries are really relished by a lot of different types of birds. I walked out one day and saw probably 6 or 7 robins all in the same shrub. So I went and grabbed my camera, and I managed to get a shot of this one just gorging himself on these serviceberries. And of course, you'll get cedar waxwings, and even orioles and some other birds will enjoy these berries. Now, this is a picture I showed earlier of the shrub where the yellow warbler nest was on the left, but this is a cranberry viburnum, and it does produce berries. When I took this picture, they weren't ripe yet, but when they get ripe, you'll get cedar waxwings and a number of different birds coming in there to eat those. It's a fast-growing shrub, by the way, if you need something that fills in quickly. So what can you put around your yard? The bigger variety of plants you have in your yard, the bigger variety of birds you're going to have. So things that offer food value are oaks because they have acorns. You got cherries and dogwoods. Birches have those little catkins that birds like to pick on. Mulberries, elderberries all have berries. So these are all good wildlife food plants. But then you also have to think about cover. Spruces, pines, firs, hemlocks, any of your evergreen or conifer trees are going to provide nice winter cover. Also, very dense deciduous shrubs still provide winter cover. And the cover is important, especially near your feeder. I showed the Cooper's hawk earlier, and the birds are going to need an escape from the feeder to some place that's got dense cover. This is a graphic, I borrowed this one from Michigan Audubon, but the point that I want to make is that if you want a variety of birds and wildlife in your yard, then you need to offer a variety of things that's going to attract them. Here they're showing wildflowers to attract your pollinators, your hummingbirds and butterflies. They're showing water in the lower right, a few more nectar plants. They're showing some big canopy trees in the back, ground covers, vines, snags, all kinds of things that provide good cover. The bigger variety that you can have in your yard, again, the bigger variety of birds you're going to have. Now, our description said we would give just a few kind of brief slides on taking pictures of birds. A lot of people are shooting nowadays with their phones and getting pretty good pictures. And I can show, when there's questions, I can show you a device that can hold your phone. But if you just want to do a point and shoot camera, if you haven't bought the camera yet, a good thing to look for is an optical zoom. This one happens to have a 40x optical zoom. I've seen some very good bird shots with these kinds of cameras. The best image quality might come from a full-size digital single lens reflex camera. These cameras, though, are big, and they have a mirror inside, so then when the light comes in, it hits the mirror and then hits a kind of a prism, kind of a thing that you can actually look through the viewfinder through the lens. But that's what makes these cameras so big. That mirror has to flip up out of the way. And we found that to shoot birds, you need a pretty good telephoto lens. So to buy a telephoto lens for this kind of camera is going to be very expensive. It's going to break your back, and it's going to break your bank.
Very true.
So we don't shoot this kind I used to shoot with a camera like this, but I couldn't afford a lens like this. Some people rent them if they're going on a trip, but what we shoot with are these, they're called mirrorless cameras. They have an electronic viewfinder, so they don't need a mirror inside to see what you're looking at. So the camera's a little more compact design. This lens that I'm holding is a 100 to 400 zoom. It's what I used for almost all the shots that you saw in this show. And if a lot of cameras have an auto feature or program feature where you just put it on that and it shoots sets the settings for you. But I would like to encourage you that if you have some override to set a shutter speed or aperture, that you play with those and end up with a high shutter speed. Because when you're hand holding a shot with a telephoto lens, any little shake is kind of magnified. And so by shooting at a very high shutter speed, it's not going to have time to record that shake. The general rule is a 200th. If you're shooting a 200 millimeter lens, it's 1 over the focal length, so a 200th of a second. But I usually try to get a 1,000th of a second or more. Another way to do that is to put it on aperture mode, crank up the ISO, which is your sensitivity setting, to maybe something like 3200, and it'll choose a high shutter speed. Earlier, I showed that nuthatch picture. This is what I used. And also the duck pictures, the diving duck pictures were shot with this setup. The camera is mounted on a spotting scope. This is equal to about a 3,000 millimeter lens, which you can't buy. So this is the only way to get some of those pictures.
Excellent way to shoot waterfowl and wading birds that are way out beyond where you can approach them.
So very brief, little bit about bird photography, and now we're ready for questions.
All right. Maybe the moderator can bring us back up here.
Okay. We have our first question there. Someone asked, when do the hummingbirds come back to Michigan?
So you'll start seeing reports of them arriving like late April. Most of them probably don't arrive till somewhere around like May 10th, but you want to have your hummingbird feeders out somewhere around May 1st, because you could get them back, earlier, and they establish their feeding routes as they're coming back. And so you want to be part of that feeding route. So that's when you want to start putting them out, like May 1st, or even at the end of April in some cases.
And they'll start moving south out of here just about the time we are looking to get our first frost, probably about a week or so before that.
Another question, a person lives in more of an urban setting. What type of birds would be attracted in more of an urban yard? And do they like jam and oranges, or what would you do in more of an urban setting?
Absolutely. You would be surprised at what you can get in an urban yard. In fact, Vic, you're in kind of an urban yard. Why don't you speak to that one?
Okay. Being in downtown Rochester here, only about half a block up from the Dairy Queen, I get a lot of birds. In the springtime, I get all the warbler migrants that we showed in the pictures. Typically, like right now, we just noticed today that our friend, the red-breasted nuthatch, is back. We get the red-bellied woodpeckers, cardinals, the white-breasted nuthatches, the tufted titmice, the goldfinches. We get the mourning doves. So there's a lot of good bird variety, even in an urban location. The key to it is if you're going to be in the city or in an urban location, be near some vegetation, trees, shrubs, bushes.
I mean, a lot of urban neighborhoods still have large trees around them because they're older neighborhoods. And so you'll still have a pretty good variety of birds.
Exactly.
Another question was, do you have a favorite bird identification book that you use?
Well, I have several old field guides that I use. The first field guide I used was the Roger Torrey Peterson Field Guide, first published in like 1934. Roger Torrey Peterson hand painted all the birds in there. I still use it. There's another one by Chandler Robbins. I still use that one. That's a very old field guide. There's some newer ones by Sibley. What guide are you using, Vic?
Well, I'm kind of old school like you. I still like my old Robbins guide, only because I was kind of weaned on that. The other one that I really like is the National Geographic Bird Guide. But of course, Rick, you and I both have kind of migrated to using iPhone apps for this now. And some of these digital apps that you can use for birding are tremendous reference material, because you can get the bird calls, you can get the range maps, you can get all kinds of things right there on your phone.
When we first started birding, you would have to look at the range map. You'd have to go by a description of the bird sound. So for example, if it's a Nashville warbler, it would say to zip, zit, seet, seet, seet. But you know, the words, you can't really, that's not doing it justice until you actually hear the bird. So the phone apps, you can just play several different sounds right there.
Well, for example, you sent me an audio file just the other day of what I think was probably a great horned owl. And on the iBird app for the iPhone, they had about 5 or 6 different calls for the great horned owl, and we were able to sort of compare some of those to what you heard. It
wasn't the typical hoot call. It was more of a owl bark, and it woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It actually kind of scared me because it was pretty loud.
Okay, we have another question. Any recommendation for binoculars? And another person asks about binoculars. Do you have for beginners that aren't super expensive?
So yeah, there are 2 styles of binoculars. There are roof prism binoculars. In fact, I have a pair right here. You can see that. These are Vortex Viper binoculars. Roof prism binoculars, what you want to, the numbers for binoculars, these are what they call 8x42. 8 is the magnification, so you're going to bring things 8 times closer. 42 is the millimeter size of the objective. So the bigger that is, the more light, but then it's a trade-off with, how good it feels in your hand and the compactness of it. A good pair of binoculars, 8x42, might run a couple $100. Vortex is a pretty good brand for in that price range, I think.
I have seen some pretty nice binoculars even in the $100 range. I know for a while that Costco was carrying a brand, and the name escapes me right now, but a friend of mine bought them, and I thought they were of pretty decent quality for the amount of money being spent.
Yeah, they've gotten better and better at making them. So even some of the inexpensive ones are going to give you pretty good optical quality. So.
We have another question. Should you use feeders year-round?
Sure. I do.
Sure. Now, it depends on, like, for example, I don't feed larger seed in the summer because my feeders are right next to my deck. And I just don't feel like cleaning that up every day. But I feed Niger seed year-round because Niger seed is going to attract all the finches, even nuthatches. I'm surprised. I've even seen some larger birds like red-winged blackbirds trying to get at the Niger seed. So those don't make as much mess at all, and I feed that year-round. And of course, the grape jelly, the orange halves, the water, the nectar solutions, all that stuff I do all summer. And then in the wintertime, I put out suet and several different seed choices.
I used to take the feeders down in the summertime, but since you turned me on to this no mess and pre-shelled sunflower seed, I keep it going all summer long. And the goldfinches just, they mob the stuff every day.
Someone asked, hey, what's the best way to attract a pileated woodpecker? Would you see those down here at all?
They're down here. They're just not as common as they are up north, but it is possible to get one at your feeder. As you saw on the slide, they like suet. So, I mean, if you put out some raw beef suet, and that's something that the squirrels won't necessarily go after either. Do that in the wintertime so that it stays fresh. But yeah, I mean, it's worth a shot.
If you've got a lot of good mature hardwoods, that are 20, 30, 40 years old nearby, they prefer the mature trees for their nesting habitat. So that keeps them in the area.
And I will say that their favorite food are carpenter ants. It's one of the reasons they're one of my favorite birds, because carpenter ants are probably one of my least favorite insects. But yeah, they'll drill holes in trees to get at the carpenter ant tunnels.
Okay, with one more question. If you want to learn to identify bird calls and sounds, what would you recommend?
Well, there's some great apps out there for that. The iBird app is what we use for a field guide, and all the sounds are in there. But I believe there's even some apps that kind of concentrate on, birds that you might find around the yard. I don't have the names of those right off the top of my head, but I think they'd be pretty easy to find apps. You can look online for some of these apps that have different bird calls on them.
If somebody doesn't have like a smartphone and they just have like a computer, would they look up Cornell or something, or Google bird
Yes.
sounds, or what do you think on that one?
So the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology is, pretty famous site for birds. It's very, they do a lot for birds. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead here. They do a lot for bird research, but they also do a lot for bird education. So you can get on their website. They actually run this thing called eBird, along with, they do it in conjunction with the Audubon Society. And eBird is a kind of almost a social media for birders. You can upload checklists to it, and then what they email you basically every day sightings that have been in your area or in your state.
Okay. Are there any more questions? If not, we want to thank Rick and Vic for the presentation today. And, we hope that you can go out and enjoy your yard and, take nature in. I know I love to just go out and take a cup of coffee out there and just really enjoy. And I hope you do too. Please be watching our calendar, as the Adult Services Department has many more programs coming up soon. I know that Catherine Wilson, our genealogy person, is going to be coming back in September. And then we have Steve, he's our World War II buff. He's going to be speaking in, I think it's October, and also November for the Edmund Fitzgerald. If you get a survey, if I did it right, because this was the first Zoom that I have done, please fill that out, and we appreciate everything. And thanks again, Rick and Vic, and thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie, and I wish everybody better birding.